Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandat Pranam.
My obeisance Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Okay, so good to see you all again. And we will begin. Om Agyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagunath Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sadvahutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Pradam Sahaguna Lalita Shri Vishaka Vikamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Prishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Trubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhe Vachapatitanam Bhavanityo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Hari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, so this is this chapter 1 is especially the first part of it. It's a little tricky to understand. I will do the different reactions to sinful life and sinful activities, and the different kinds of reactions that are there. So we'll try to describe those in a way that we can all understand. But what's happening here in this chapter is Rupa Goswami is explaining, and Srila Prabhupada is translating, the 6 symptoms of pure bhakti. Okay, and there's 6 of them. 2 of them manifest at the stage of sadhana, 2 of them manifest at the stage of bhava, and 2 of them, let me correct that. 2 of them manifest at the stage of sadhana, 4 of them manifest at the stage of bhava, and all 6 manifest at the stage of prema. Okay? And they are kleshagni in Sanskrit, the relief from material distress, subhadha, the attainment of auspiciousness, moksha lakuta krit, that the pure bhakti derides, or the person is not interested even in the happiness of liberation. Sudurlabha, it's rarely achieved, and this is a beautiful one. Sandarananda Visheshatma. It puts one on transcendental platform of transcendental pleasure. So you'll notice that 3 out of the 6 are about happiness. Subhada is auspiciousness or happiness, some happiness, a lot of happiness actually. Moksha Lagudakrit means, the happiness is so intense that it derides liberation. And Sandarananda Visheshatma, it is nothing else can enter you except the bliss of Krishna consciousness. So so happiness is mentioned on 3 different levels. Okay, so that's kind of an overview of this chapter. Now, to get into some of the details, well, first of all, Prabhupada, Rupa Goswami quotes you see what happens a lot in what happens in this book again and again and again and again and again is Rupa Goswami wants to make a philosophical point, and then you'll see all of these different quotes from Shastra. You may have noticed that in this, if you read this, hopefully you all read this chapter, that there's so many quotes, and they're all there to prove a particular point that Rupa Goswami, he's not just quoting because he likes to quote verses. He's quoting these verses to substantiate a point that he wants to make. Okay, so he begins by just quoting Lord Kapila Dev, or is it? Just one second. I just have to get my everything set up here. Yes. My dear mother, those who are my pure devotees and who have no desire for material benefit or philosophical speculation, so karma and gyan, have their minds so much engaged in my service that they are never interested in asking me for anything except to be engaged in that service. They do not even beg to live in my abode. So that's a definition of pure devotional service. Just they don't, we not, it's not a business exchange between us and Krishna. So Prabhupada is, or Rupa Goswami is setting the stage for describing pure devotional service by this verse from Lord Kapila. Okay, so then we're starting to go into the 6 characteristics of pure devotional service. And the first one is the first part of the chapter, and this is the somewhat tricky. It's not tricky in the sense that the overall point is so clear that kleshagni, you get relief from all distress. And what is the source of distress? It's sinful reactions and sinful desire, material desires, and ultimately ignorance. Okay, so that's that, although we're going to get into some of the details, that's the basic point that we need to know. That pure bhakti gives relief from all distress, which is caused by sins. So there's 3 basic causes of stress. One is called papam, or sin, bijam, material desires, and the root cause is avidya, ignorance. So then what we have in the next part of this chapter is a description of those 3. First, papam, sinful activity. And Prabhupada says that for some of our sinful activities, we are awaiting distress in the future. And for others which are mature, we are suffering at the present moment. So that's describing, and I'll show you some diagrams in a while that maybe help a little bit. But that's describing parabdha and aparabdha karma, or papam, parabdha, papam, and aparabdha. Parabdha means manifest, and aparabdha means unmanifest, or Prabhupada says mature, some that are mature and some that have not matured yet. Okay, so let's talk about manifest sinful activities. Those are the ones that we're experiencing now. The sinful action leads to these 2 things. Let me share my screen for a second here to explain it. Share screen. So you see here this diagram. The sinful action leads to 2 reactions. One is unmanifest, aparabdha, and one is manifest. Okay, that's the basic idea. So manifest is, where we're born, what kind of family we're born into. Like, in the Gita, it says that, suchinam shimmitam gehe yogo prashta bijayate, that, if one is a good yogi, they're born into a Brahmin family or a family of rich aristocracy. So our prarabdha karma, our beauty or lack of it, these are all parts of prarabdha karma. And therefore, Rupa Goswami is quoting Devahuti actually, how she points out that, and Rupa Goswami is quoting, that even if someone's born in the family of dog eaters, they, by devotional service, can overcome that prarabdha karma and, ultimately be a devotee, go back home, back to God. So that's the prarabdha karma, okay? Our manifest, that means our birth and our intelligence and our beauty and all those things, right? That is our karma. Then there's this unmanifest sinful reactions called aparabdha. And that is this big container of desires, sinful reactions and desires from previous lives or earlier in this life. And there also, Prabhupada writes that as the blazing fire can burn any amount of fuel to ashes, so devotional service to the Lord in Krishna consciousness can burn up all the fuel of sinful activities. That is the referring to this unmanifest, right? So how this happens is, well, it gets a little complicated, not complicated, but I'll show you another diagram. So you do this sinful action, and then you get two kinds of unmanifest reaction. So remember, we already did the part about manifest, the prarabdha. Now we're just focusing on unmanifest. And you can't, the Sanskrit letters, the diacritics are a little messed up here, but you get two kinds of unmanifest reactions. One that ultimately leads to manifest, so that's physical and emotional suffering, and one that creates sinful inclinations called kutam. I'm sure I'm giving you a lot of details here. I realize that. Okay. So let's see. So how this takes place, this is Prabhupada quotes and Rupa Goswami quotes from the Padma Purana, that there's this cycle of unmanifest reactions that go through 4 phases. Aparabdha, when it's completely unmanifest; kuta, where there's just this sinful proclivity; bija, where it becomes a strong desire; and then prarabdha, where you actually perform the sinful act and you get the karma. So here, let's see if this diagram helps a little bit. I know I'm covering a lot, but I'll take questions in a little while. So you perform a sinful action, you get aparabdha karma that leads to prarabdha karma on one hand, and also sinful inclination, sinful desire. And what happens? You perform another sinful action. So without looking into the details, getting into the details of this so much, you can see how entangling the material world is. Because you keep on cycling, this keeps on cycling, and this also, you get different reactions in different lifetimes. Right, so this is all going on and going on. All those people that you walk by on the streets of your city, they're all going through this, unless they're unless they're a devotee, one way or another connected with God. And that's, again, remember, the overall point of this is to show us that by bhakti you can overcome all of this mess. But otherwise, this is the cycle. I have two more diagrams that I'll show you in a minute. But this is the cycle of sinful reactions, and it's no fun. So remember, this was all about sinful reactions. Now, the next point is about sinful desires. You understand the difference? The reactions, but then the desires in our heart, which are so painful to have. Prabhupada quotes Ajamila, or Rupa Goswami quotes Ajamila, and that's a very, very important point, because Ajamila, when he was a Brahmana, when he was young, he was a real Paka Brahmin, right? He was giving charity. He was austere. He was learning. He was doing all the things that we understand. A Brahmin is not a devotee necessarily, but that didn't save him from developing material desires, sinful desires. And of course, we know the story of what he did, and he married a prostitute and all those things, and just got caught up in all kinds of sinful activities. And then later, just by chanting Narayana, he was absolved of all of his sinful activities, just by that. So charity, austerity, things like all these Vedic rituals, they can neutralize sinful reactions, but they don't neutralize sinful desires. And therefore, Prabhupada actually gives us two examples: that a person may be cured of venereal disease by medical treatment, but because the sex desire remains, he may become implicated again. And then the example that we also saw in the Nectar of Instruction of the elephant carefully taking bath and then rolling in the dirt again. But bhakti is so strong that it can even uproot the sinful desire. And so remember, we mentioned sinful reactions, sinful desires, and the root of both of them is called avidya. So let me show you one more diagram. So the avidya is the original cause. That creates some sinful desire. That leads us to a sinful action. That leads us to aprarabdha karma, which has two manifestations. It creates a psychological disposition, which leads to a desire, and we keep on going around and around in a circle here. Plus, it gives us a manifest karma, and we suffer. So, again, this is what's going on in the life of human beings all over the planet every day. This cycle. I'll leave it up there for a second just for you to think about it. But and the root cause is our misidentification. And we've talked about that before. Our misidentification with this body, my misidentification that I'm American or I'm Indian or I'm woman or man, or all those different ignorances that are not, that any thought or that is different than I'm Krishna's eternal servant is ignorance to one degree or another. Okay, I'm going to go a little further and then take questions and comments. Okay. So yes, that's the root cause, thinking our ignorance, thinking ourselves the enjoyer, and then we act on that and we get the reactions. As Prabhupada writes, as long as one is ignorant about his identity, he is sure to act wrongly and thereby become entangled in material contamination. So the key really to all of this is to uproot ignorance. And that is the best way to be happy and uproot suffering. And Rupa Goswami is going to make it clear, only bhakti can uproot ignorance. And then Prabhupada gives a summary. Pure devotional service in Krishna consciousness is the highest enlightenment. And when such enlightenment is there, it is just like a blazing forest fire, killing all the inauspicious snakes of desire. So that's the power of bhakti. It eradicates sinful reactions. It nullifies sinful desires. It counteracts everything, including ignorance. And therefore, it's the only permanent relief from suffering. Okay, so we covered a lot there. Some questions, comments, thoughts?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Ram Krishna. Prabhu, talking about this Ajamula Charitra from Srimad Bhagavatam, when I was narrating this to one of my known friends, he asked one question, Prabhu. Okay, then what is the point in adhering to all these penance or austerities or chanting Krishna? At the time of my death or nearing my death, I will chant the word Hare Krishna, Hare Sriman Narayana, Narayana. All my things will go. So why all these things are to be observed from now on? He asked a question, Prabhu. I didn't know how to answer that. You can please enlighten me, Prabhu.
That is the kind of cheating propensity. I kind of thought. Oh yes, there's this shortcut. I should take the Ajamila shortcut. Well, there's so many things to say. It's a great question, Prabhu. First of all, the Ajamila pastime is there to just show us just how powerful the holy name is, right? And if people know the whole story about Ajamila, after he was saved, he didn't just go, but he went to Haridwar and he performed austerities. He performed sadhana bhakti, and then he went back. So it wasn't like he just got a free ride to Vaikuntha automatically. That's one thing. The next thing is that, and it's a great question because we're talking about pure bhakti. The pure devotion, as we read about in the very first quotation from Kapila, is we don't want anything for ourselves. We just want to give our love for Krishna. We just want to serve Krishna. We just want to give Krishna pleasure. So that obviously isn't there in the kind of question that you were asked. I'm not criticizing the person that was asking you. That's not the point. So the real devotee doesn't think, well, is there some shortcut? Wonderful. And then there's also the point that Ajamila is a special case. I mean, there's no guarantee that we're going to be able to remember Narayan at the time of death. Probably everyone in this room knows someone who passed away during this COVID crisis. And we can't guarantee that all of them were chanting Narayan's name when they left this world. Of course, they were devotees, and Krishna will protect them. That's another topic for another time. So the real way to ensure that we can remember Narayan at the time of death is to serve him during our life. Okay. Otherwise, if our whole mind is caught up in business or our family and this and that, we're going to remember our business and our family at the time of death. It's kind of like, have you ever done any gardening or farming, Ram Krishna Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay,
yes.
So you know this. If you're a farmer, can you just like not do anything, not till the land, not plant the seeds, not do anything, and then just before harvest time, do a big marathon, stay up all night, plant the seeds, water it, all within like a few days, and then you're going to get this great. Is that how the farm works?
No.
You have to. The principle of farming is, you have to sow the seeds at the right time. You have to hope that there's going to be some good monsoon, but not too much, right? And maybe if it's a garden, you have to take out the weeds or whatever, and then you can get a harvest.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So generally, bhakti is like that. There's not, it's not the, we don't try to find some clever shortcut. If Krishna wants, like in Ajamil's case, or he can do, but the devotee is more into the principle of the farm. That let me do my sadhana, let me let me gradually advance in Krishna consciousness and give more of my life to Krishna. Is that all right, Prabhu?
Thanks, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Now there's something in the chat. Having a desire also to remove the sinful reaction is also an aparad. Having a desire also to remove the sinful, but realizing that we are getting into this mess, so we are taking action to come out of this, is that not considered an aparad? So the first question is, having a desire to remove sinful reactions, I don't think that's an aparad. It may not be the focus of a pure devotee, but certainly we're reading this whole section that it's that we need to get rid of we want to get rid of our sinful reactions. Now, the way to do that is stated very clearly in the last chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, verse 66. Sarva dharmam parityagya ekam sharanam braja aham tvam, and there Krishna says, aham tvam sarva papebhyo, all sarva, all pape, all pap, katam, finished, right? So for a devotee, it's almost like they don't have to focus on getting free from sinful reactions. They focus on Krishna's pleasure. Krishna does the rest. But I think having a desire to remove sinful reactions is not an aparad. It just may not be on the highest level, but it's natural to want to become free from sinful reactions. But let's read the rest of them. But realizing that we are getting into this, we are taking action to come out. It's different at different times. I think I told you one time, Vraj Vihari Prabhu went up to Srila Prabhupada and said, Srila Prabhupada, we don't want to go back to Godhead. We just want to serve you life after life. Because he knew that higher than wanting to go back to Godhead is wanting to just do service. And Prabhupada, understanding the kind of neophyte realization of his disciple, said, don't make me come back to save you. Right? So he said, you're not ready yet for this, mama jamani ishwari bhavatad bhakti rahaitu ki tvai. Just try to get out of the material world and become a good devotee, right? So again, I don't think it's an aparad to want to get out of this world. But ultimately, for a devotee, we understand, okay, I want to get out of this world. How do I do it? By loving Krishna. Otherwise, yes, you're right. A desire for liberation that does not include Krishna bhakti is not a purely spiritual thing. I hope that's all right, Amol. And then Sandananda Prabhu or Navina Gopika Mataji. It is important to concentrate. Is it important to concentrate on these change process while in sadhana bhakti, or simply get involved in bhakti? Well, it's good to know this process in order to pass the exam. But that's why but seriously, as I began this talk, I said the overall point is the most important one, and that is that sin leads to distress. Bhakti is the only means that totally cuts out sin, because it cuts it at the root. Right? I don't know if I can't remember. Well, actually, I can. We had a garden in the middle of the Gurukul in Vrindavan. So if you know anything about gardening, you want to, and you have weeds in the garden. If you just cut down the weeds, like, with the lawnmower, they're going to grow back up. The only way to get rid of the weeds is to pull them out almost manually by the root. And so only bhakti does that. That was the second point, right? There were sinful activities, then there was sinful desire. And sinful desire is uprooted by bhakti. And then the cause of both of them, avidya, is also uprooted by bhakti. So I hope that answers your question. Now, Vinitji says, can you please explain the difference between sinful desire and sinful disposition? Very good question. Well, in Sanskrit, they're called bija and kuta. And let me just check my notes, make sure I get it right. I don't want to give you the wrong information. Yes. So that's what I told you. So bija is the sinful desire, and kuta is the disposition. Let me give an example. So we have all of these different desires in our heart from so many different lifetimes. They're like a big pot, like one of those big pots you see sometimes devotees when they're cooking khichdi for mass distribution, right? And I remember in Chennai during the tsunami, the devotees were cooking khichdi. So you can imagine, so we have this big container of all these unmanifest. And so by the Lord's arrangement, some of them start percolating up, become a little bit more. And that's just like a psychological inclination. So you're just, give you an example. You're walking by a bank one day, and for years, nothing happened. You just walk by the bank, let's say it was on your way to work. And then one day, you look at the bank and you say, gosh, if I could steal the money from that bank, I wouldn't have to work anymore. And it's not like it's just a thought. And that's kind of what kuta is. It's a thought. And then, you think about it a little bit more every day you walk by, and it's more of a thought. And then when it becomes bija, it's like you start planning it, right? You see when the truck comes to take all the money and how many guards are there. Are there any, cameras on the block, and et cetera, et cetera. What are the hours, and, and all those different things. So then it becomes really like a bija, like a desire. And then you actually do it. And you do some sinful activity. And then you get, remember, two results. You may, in this case, you may get caught by the police and then put in jail. That would be a real parabdha karma. And then the aparabdha is you've created more desires to cheat and do things like that in future lives. I hope that answers your question, Vineet Kumar ji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Yes.
The one thing you said is bija means sinful desire, and the kuta means what, Prabhuji? I didn't get that.
It's before it's a strong desire, it's just a mental inclination.
Fine, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Okay. I think the word I used was sinful disposition.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
It's hard to translate. You all know it's hard. It's not all, translating Sanskrit to English all the time is not a perfect science.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, I have a question on avidya.
Okay.
Prabhu mentioned that avidya is predominantly lack of knowledge or ignorance about our real identity.
Yeah.
Which is I'm not this body, and I'm a spirit soul.
And all the upadhis, all the designations that we think we are. Yes. Yes. Go ahead, Prabhu.
So Prabhu, at least I'll talk for myself. Yes, we understand this. In a way, we have accepted this. So many years we have been hearing this and reading Bhagavad Gita and attending various lectures. Somewhere, it's still not in our action and belief system, or at least in mine. How do we live this non-identity, if I can call it, from identity to non-identity? How can we live this and then practice our life according to that?
I think it's just the process of Krishna consciousness. One is, of course, association, right? Associating with people who are more advanced than us in giving up their upadhis and acting in their real constitutional position. Another thing is to not worry about it, but just focus on serving Krishna. And by doing that, you'll naturally develop more and more that identity instead of others. And then really trying to get serious about hearing and chanting, because that is, as Ramakrishna Prabhu was mentioning, that is so powerful. That is so powerful. You know that example Srila Prabhupada gives about, I don't know the whole story, but basically a person is having terrible digestive problems, and the doctor gives a very shocking diagnosis to take ghee every day, like raw ghee. You know this story?
No, I don't recollect.
Well, I'm probably not doing it justice, but basically, so he takes raw ghee, and everyone's thinking, what kind of, ghee is so hard to digest, and what are you doing? And so, but he followed, and the first days he got sick, more sick it seemed, and this and that, but slowly he was getting better. And they said, how did that work? And he said, I knew there was a reaction to that, and that ghee's hard to digest, but it was also coating the whatever is leading to the stomach, which was causing a lot of the distress. So slowly, after a long period of time, every day taking the ghee, coating more and more, got better. So we coat our consciousness by hearing and chanting, and knowing that that's a great way to get Krishna's blessing, and by ultimately the avidya goes away by Krishna's mercy. Not ultimately, that's the reality when Krishna is pleased. So we have to work on it from our side, but we also need to basically focus on Krishna, and he'll help us. Is that all right?
So, Prabhu, yes, so we do understand the importance of association, and to the extent possible, we all put in our efforts to maintain that and do hearing and chanting process. But many of us are also, again, very actively engaged in our you can say grasta life, our corporate lives, and our association with non-devotees outside of the temple. And of course, the COVID has not made the situation any better, that we are locked in our houses, rooms, etc., and just in front of laptops with our office calls. So those opportunities are minimizing of getting appropriate association. So that pressure still continues. So in such a situation also, how do we maintain that belief or action on our identity or non-identity?
Well, maybe we have 50 devotees on this call. Maybe we could ask them, what are some of their tricks? Some of their, well, tricks is a bad word. What do they do to, in this situation that you just outlined? Maybe some people could put in the chat what works for you in maintaining your Krishna consciousness during this pandemic, and maybe working in the corporate world and having to deal with so many people who are not devotees. I'd like to hear what you all say. So if you could put some thoughts, either go off of mute and say it, or put it in the chat.
So in the meantime, as the thoughts come in on the chat, my second question was, is avidya only identity issue, or is there anything beyond an avidya beyond identity issue?
Well, the identity issue is like the linchpin, the key to everything else, because who we think we are will determine how we act, who we associate with, what we eat, how we sleep, how we mate, how we defend, how we, it's all depending on who we think we are. Right? So we're in this tricky situation now, because we're partially thinking we're this body and we're of this world, and we're partially thinking, no, I'm Krishna's eternal servant. So we're in this tatasta shakti. So let's see. One devotee said, I listened to class on YouTube. Listen to classes on YouTube. Okay. We've only gotten one reply so far. Everyone is so shy. I'm not going to continue until I get some more responses, so you better start typing. But yes, okay. Amol says, I get more time now to read the books, specifically Krishna book. Very nice. Game theory. Everything is a game and you are a player, hence removing oneself from thinking that you are the actor. Well, that's interesting, Navadip Sachi. Mataji. Radha says, or Zoom was our relief for Vaishnava Association. We had our daily morning programs when all the Vaishnavas were present. Wow. Full morning program by Zoom. Shriman Zoom. Reading scriptures, hearing more and more. Yes. Yeah, we are, it's in, like we've always said, technology is such a double-edged sword. I remember I think I told you this story, when I moved to India in the 80s, I took a whole trunk. It was so heavy. And it was over 1,000 cassettes of Prabhupada's lectures. And now you could have 10,000 cassettes on this little thing and not hurt your back. The problem is you can have all kinds of nonsense on this thing as well. But it's amazing how things have changed. Yeah, okay, let's see, there's a few more. Attending various online programs conducted by the temple and being a part of it provided me some motivation in the past months. I get more time for chanting, reading, and arti, attending classes. Wow. Okay, so some reading with children, Bhagavatam, which I never got to do till now. Okay, thank you, Vrajeshwari Pran Mataji. Yeah. Okay, strong morning sadhana, chanting, reading, and listening to Bhagavatam. Wow, very good, Sarva Pavana and Abhay. Excellent. Yeah, well, I'm inspired. And then Vinita writes, I search more opportunities in engaging myself by taking sessions, preaching as it makes me bound to read and hear. Otherwise, I start giving excuse to myself. It helps me to stick to my routine. So, okay, very good. Thank you for this, and keep typing if you want. For me, it's a challenge because I kind of have, I guess most of us have two jobs, right? Our spiritual life and our work. And I guess I have three because I have my spiritual life. I work for the government, and I do my ISKCON Resolve service, or teaching at all different times. Usually it's mornings and evenings. Like it's 8 o'clock at night. Well, it's 8:45 now for me. In the evening. So I can never understand all the great souls here that have time for all the things that you're saying you do online, because I find it impossible to find time except to listen to myself give class, practically speaking. Someone else said, now we are getting more and more association of wonderful devotees from all over the world online on Zoom. And during festivals, yes, very good. Yeah, there's so much online. It's almost like, how do you decide how to do it all? There's so much online. Yeah. And then, of course, there's all of Prabhupada's lectures online. So wonderful. Okay, does that answer your question, Rasa Sindhu, Vraj Vihari Prabhu?
Yeah, yes, Prabhu.
Okay, you can get inspiration from your colleagues there in Bangalore. Now someone else says, Murari Madhava says, among the different stages of sin, how to understand at what stage level amount of sin we are suffering presently. We're suffering presently from prarabdha karma. This body is the manifest karma. So like I said, where you were born, your social economic background, your level of intelligence, this is all prarabdha karma, as is, when you get a flat tire in your car, or when you get a raise at work and get more money, and all of these things are prarabdha karma. Does astrology in the Vedic system help us to understand? Yeah, well, it's very connected. It basically can tell you, if you can find a real astrologer, that's Prabhupada would say, that's the challenge in Kali Yuga, to actually find a astrologer. But there, they can give you some idea of your karmic destiny, and even maybe some ideas of what you can do to try to adjust that destiny. And then the last thing, I feel it's very, very difficult to come out of this cycle on sin based on my present situation. Level of seriousness and sincerity, even after all these understandings, and trying practically with possible extent. I do not see any hope. How to get confidence? Well, Murari Madhava Prabhu, you are making great advancement, because you are in the right consciousness to get Krishna's mercy, is to understand that we are hopeless without his help. And we even don't have determination. We have hridaya durbalyam, or weakness of heart. We know what's right and we still don't do it. And so at some point we just have to do the Draupadi program and raise our hand in utter hopelessness and say, Krishna, from this day forward, I'm your serious and sincere devotee. I've wasted so much time in this material world, but now I'm yours. And really mean it, and tell other devotees that this is what you're going to do, so that they hold you accountable. And don't try to take on everything at once. Try to improve one good habit, maybe whatever it is, getting up a half hour earlier, or chanting all 16 rounds in one sitting, or being very quiet and peaceful when taking prasadam, whatever it is. And just dire, take one thing, improve it. After some time, it really becomes part of your habit. Then another thing. It's very difficult to do it all at once. Okay, starting tomorrow, just like, New Year's Eve, New Year's resolutions, starting tomorrow, I'm chanting all my rounds before 8 o'clock. I'm going to get up by 4 o'clock. I'm going to, take prasadam peacefully. I'm going to serve so many Vaishnavas. I'm going to chant the whole morning program. I'm going to, listen to a class every day, and it's just like, oh, right? After a few weeks, so better to do it slowly. I hope that's helpful. But seriously, I mean that, Murari Madhava Prabhu, that if we can, what you just expressed is a great stepping stone. It's not the goal, obviously, but it's a stepping stone to making real advancement. To understand that I don't have a level of seriousness. I'm not sincere. I really have to do that. I have to give my effort, and I have to pray to Krishna for help. And never give up. Never give up. It's convince yourself that Krishna consciousness is the only show in town. It's the only thing worth striving for. And I may fall flat on my face 99 times, and I'm going to pick myself up 100 times. We just say, Krishna, I'm yours. I know I sometimes mess things up, and I don't do things right, and I don't follow the sadhana so well, but I am yours, and you're stuck with me. I'm sorry to say it, Krishna. I know you'd rather have some better person, but you are stuck with me because I'm not going anywhere. I don't have any other choice. There's no plan B. Right? There's no, okay, well, if it doesn't work out in Krishna Bhakti, I can take up Buddhism. I'll become a Christian and move to Kerala. Whatever it is. I'll become a communist and move to Kerala. Everything is in Kerala, it seems. But no, we have to just be like, we've set down our anchor, with the boat, we set down our anchor in the harbor of Krishna consciousness, and we're not going anywhere. And Pran Vallabha says, for all our sinful activities, we have to suffer in hell. Again, why do we need to suffer in the next life or coming lives? Well, it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be in hell. It can be, you can be born in this planet. I mean, we're all here, and we're not in hell, and we're still getting our sinful reactions. I would, yeah. It would be, seems like it's hard to be Amaraj or to be, whoever keeps track of all these things, because people are a mixed bag usually. Many people, right? They may be pious, they may start a hospital or take care of elderly people or this or that. And then they may go to McDonald's and have a burger, a chicken. Well, I think in India, they don't serve beef at McDonald's, right? I think they serve chicken. Not that I've ever gone there, but so we're always kind of a mixed bag, but we suffer. It's educational, and we don't want, if an intelligent person says, oh my God, I'm suffering, I don't want to do this anymore, let me take to Krishna consciousness. Why do we need to suffer? Well, we need to suffer because we've chosen to Krishna Bhuli Se Jiva Nadir Bahurmukh. We've turned our back on Krishna. And then when we've turned our back on Krishna, it manifests in all different kinds of unsavory ways. We should, though, carry on, because we only done one of the 6. Yeah, the rest are shorter, but still. Okay, so that was Subhadha, or relief from distress, or all auspicious. Now, oh no, I'm sorry, relief from distress. The next one is Subhadha. That was, Kleshagni. Now Subhadha, all auspicious. So there are, Rupa Goswami and Prabhupada say that for something to be all auspicious, it needs to have 4 things. Benefits everyone, can attract everyone, produces good qualities, and gives superior happiness. So only devotional service meets all 4 of those criteria. So in benefiting everyone, Prabhupada compares bhakti to the United Nations, right? And its failure to benefit others and to attract everyone. But he says, Krishna consciousness, on the other hand, he says everyone can be attracted by the movement and everyone can feel the results. So the greatest welfare activity is to try to give Krishna bhakti to others. And then the Padma Purana confirms this in the quote, a person who is engaged in devotional service in full Krishna consciousness is to be understood to be doing the best service to the whole world and to be pleasing everyone in the world. In addition to human society, is pleasing even to the trees and animals, because they also become attracted by such a movement. So those were the first 2, attract everyone and benefit everyone. And then the next one is developing saintly qualities. Prabhupada and Rupa Goswami quote the verse, Yasyasti Bhaktir Bhagavati Akinchana Savar Gunas Tatra Samasate Sura Harera Bhaktasya Kuto Mahaguna Manoratena Sutodhavato Bhahi. That persons who have unflinching faith in Krishna and are without any duplicity can develop all the good qualities of the demigods. So, and Prabhupada gives some examples. He gives modern, he talks about how modern education doesn't necessarily give people good qualities. But even Prabhupada says a Krishna conscious boy, even if he is not very well educated, can immediately give up all illicit sex life, gambling, meat eating, and intoxication. Whereas those who are not in Krishna consciousness, although very highly educated, are often drunkards, meat eaters, sex mongers, and gamblers. then Prabhupada goes into the whole thing about yoga, and says that this, because some people may think, well, yoga is all auspicious, and Prabhupada writes, artificially, they may sit down for so-called meditation, but immediately after their yogic performance, they will engage themselves again in such activities as illicit sex life, gambling, meat eating, and many other nonsensical things. But a Krishna conscious person automatically gives up all this nonsense and develops a higher character. So not by education alone or by yoga can one develop good qualities in the same way that bhakti does. And then the last one is, the last of the four characteristics is superior happiness. And Prabhupada there talks about three kinds of happiness: happiness from sense gratification, happiness from impersonalism, and happiness from bhakti. And of course, bhakti is superior for two reasons. One is that the others are temporary, and bhakti is eternal, and it includes all the other happinesses in bhakti. So one may get some sense gratification, not by seeking it, by just taking nice prasadam, for example, things like that. It just comes to the devotee. So to substantiate this, the first point was that happiness in devotional service is eternal. And Prabhupada, says that even the pleasures of liberation is not eternal. And then he gives the example of Mayavadis that fall down and return to material activities. And then actually this is the place where the yoga, the pleasures of yogic perfection are also not material. And Prabhupada goes on to talk about, you probably noticed that, how the yoga siddhis are basically subtle versions of modern material science. And the pleasure of both are considered temporary. And of course, sense gratification is temporary. We all know that. Prabhupada writes, foolish people who are enamored of the glimmer of modern materialistic advancement are thinking that the Krishna conscious movement is for less intelligent men. Quote, I am better off being busy with my material comforts, maintaining a nice apartment, family, and sex life. These people do not know that at any moment they can be kicked out of their material situation. Due to ignorance, they do not know that real life is eternal. The temporary comforts of the body are not the goal of life. Okay, so we're saying that, happiness is eternal, and therefore things like liberation, mystic perfection, and sense gratification are not eternal. Okay, so any questions or comments on this second one? All auspicious, Subhadha. No? Okay, then we can carry on to, let's see. Let me see how Prabhupada words it. Happiness in Krishna consciousness. So Rupa Goswami gives two quotes to say that it derides the happiness of liberation. That means it's just like, compare, and the happiness of liberation, it's no joke. To understand, I'm not this body, I'm not of this world, that this is very powerful, but bhakti gives a happiness, I think probably it says 1 trillion times more. So this is moksha, the Sanskrit is moksha labhuta krit. And he gives two examples. A devotee doesn't care a fig for other happiness, is what he says. and all other joys follow devotion as attendants follow a queen. So the what people perform, it's kind of like connected with what Ramakrishna Prabhu was saying, that, you know, well, no, you have to work so hard to perform austerities and all that. That's really for the impersonalists. They try to do that, and the happiness that they get is nothing compared to the happiness of a devotee who's in kirtan and chanting and hearing the Bhagavatam, etc. So some questions or comments on this one, or on happiness in general? Okay, well, think about it for a minute. I'm just going to ask you all to let me take a 2-minute break, and I'll be back in 2 minutes, okay? Okay, I'm back. Something in the chat? Oh, no, just any announcements. Okay. Let us continue. So, the next one, oh wait. The rarity. Yes. The next one is called the rarity of pure devotional service. Sudurlabha, which means difficult to achieve. And there's 2 reasons, right, that Prabhupada gives. One is you can't do it on your own efforts. And that was kind of what I was saying to Murari Madhava Prabhu. You can't do it on your own efforts alone. And Krishna is actually a little reluctant to give it to us. So let's explain that. Bhakti cannot be attained by anything else except by bhakti. And then the reference is given by Lord Shiva. My dear Sati, if one is a very fine philosopher analyzing the different processes of knowledge, he can achieve liberation from the material entanglement. By performance of the ritualistic sacrifices recommended in the Vedas, one can be elevated to the platform of pious activities and thereby enjoy the material comforts of life to the fullest extent. But all such endeavors can hardly offer anyone devotional service to the Lord, not even if one tries for it by such processes for many, many thousands of births. So we make an effort, but we understand it's not our effort alone. Krishna has to give us pure bhakti. Now he's reluctant to give it for a very important reason, because it brings him under control. Narada Muni, there's a quote from Narada to Yudhisthira here about the power of devotional service to control Krishna. And so, yeah, if bhakti if pure devotional service is so powerful that it controls Krishna, Krishna is not going to just give it out to anybody, right? And then the last one, the last of the 6, whoops, it's called the happiness of becoming one with the Supreme. Wait, is that the last? Well, wait. I'm getting confused here. One sec. Now the last one is attracting Krishna. So pure prema bhakti is so powerful that it attracts and controls even Krishna. Because, we are really controlled by our attachments. If you think about our life, why do you all have corporate jobs? Why don't you just live in the brahmacharya ashram? No problem. Save all that time and money and go to the morning program every day and see the deities every morning. Why not do that? Well, we're attached to our family, and I'm not saying in a bad way, they're devotees and all that, but there's an attachment there, right? Otherwise, and it's dharmic also. We're following dharma. We don't want to, have our wife give birth to a child and then we take sannyas 3 weeks later. That's not dharmic, right? But we have to admit also that there's some attachment there. So we are very much, everyone in this world is controlled by their attachments. And what are we attached to? We're attached to things that give us pleasure, generally. So only really, detached, independent, self-satisfied people, only really people who are really self-satisfied can be detached. And that's really Krishna. He's fully self-satisfied. But even though he's fully self-satisfied, he's attracted to his own pleasure potency, the Ladini Shakti. And the essence of the Ladini Shakti is love of God. And the personification of the Ladini Shakti is who? Anyone know?
Srimati Radharani.
Yes, Srimati Radharani. Exactly. Yeah. So there's no question of any other process of self-realization having this kind of potency, right? That it attracts Krishna. It just doesn't work in the same way. And I did skip one, by the way. I'll go back to it. I skipped. I skipped one, but I'll go back to it. But right now, let's talk about attracting Krishna. So, Prabhupada adds about this. So that is the position of the Pandavas. Although Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the greatest among all greats, he remained with those royal brothers, being attracted by their devotion, by their friendship, and by their love. This is the proof of how great this process of devotional service is. It can attract even the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And I missed one here. The happiness of becoming one with the Supreme. And there Prabhupada writes, Srila Rupa Goswami says that if Brahmananda, or the happiness of becoming one with the Supreme, is multiplied by 1 trillion-fold, it still cannot compare to an atomic fraction of the happiness derived from the ocean of devotion. So that Prabhupada says that Brahmananda feeling is not comparable to Krishna Bhakti. So that kind of finishes this chapter. but I'm open for questions and comments.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam.
Yes,
Achyuta
Prabhu.
Padaravinda Das here.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Everywhere in this whole chapter, it is referred to as pure devotional service. That I want to underline the word pure. And I feel somewhere we are too far away from that pure. So how do we get there in terms of really doing that pure devotional service? Because everything what we do, we are trying, attempting, we are practicing. But then when we actually define the word pure, I feel somewhere we are too, at least for myself, we're too far away from that pure devotional service, and hence the achieving the final goal, the destination is quite difficult.
Well, two answers to that. The first one is we did study last week the entire definition of pure devotional service. Anya bilashita shunyam Gana karma navritam anukulyena Krishna anu silanam bhakti uttamam. That we have to make our material desires zero. What are they? Gana, karma, and yoga, etc. And how do we do that? Anukul, in a favorable way, follow in the footsteps of the previous acharyas and serve Krishna. Anukulyena Krishna anu silanam bhakti uttamam. And another answer to your question is that this is the importance, one of the importance, not the only importance, obviously, but this is the importance of being linked to the parampara and serving our spiritual master. And that's because, as you're saying, Prabhuji, we may have impure bhakti, but if we're performing our activities on the order of our spiritual master, or Prabhupada or the temple president, but you understand, the chain of command, so to speak, back to Krishna. Then what the spiritual master does is he takes our impure bhakti and offers it through the parampara in a pure state. So he purifies that bhakti. So this is what's so important to accept. This is why Rupa Goswami, when we study these 64 items of bhakti, the first ones are all about the guru. So it's a very important thing to meditate on. We may have impurities, but if we're at least within the boat of following the guru's instructions, that gets offered up purely to Krishna. Is that all right?
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Vineet Kumar Prabhu. It says mature sinful activities are exhibited if one is suffering from some chronic disease, if one is suffering from some legal implications, if one is born in a low and degraded family, or if one is uneducated or very ugly. Can you please explain the context and meaning of the word ugly here? Where did I? Well, beauty and ugly is certainly in the eyes of the beholder. Now, we may have some culture, the culture that we live in may have, defined a little bit. I think there's some pretty obvious things about being ugly, right? If you're, we don't have to get into all those details here. But then Prabhupada would say, we were talking about attachment a few minutes ago, that Prabhupada would say that, many husbands think of their wife as very beautiful, even if, by objective standards, it may not be because of that attachment. So, it's just a general understanding of, it's all relative. You compare, let's say you're talking about the beauty of this world compared to, if you saw the beauty of the residents of the heavenly planets, you'd think everyone on this planet is ugly. Right? So it's a relative term, and therefore it's a little hard to define. But so there's two things. I think there's a general understanding of what ugly might look like, and then there's also it being very relative. One person's, so it's just a general statement about being ugly. Is that all right? Anything else? Or what else? Rasika Ratika Mataji says, when I devotional service, I guess when I do devotional service and get appreciation for it, I feel happy and get motivated to do it much more better way. So is it okay? Yes. Anything that motivates you to do more devotional service is wonderful. Now, there may be times in your life when, as you advance more, where just the service itself is happiness and not the recognition or lack of recognition that we get. And so it's okay, Rasika Ratika, it's natural that, especially if it's devotees that we love and they appreciate what we're doing, that's the most natural thing in the world. The thing we just have to be a little careful of is that we don't depend upon that. Because what if you don't get appreciation? Does that mean you won't be motivated to do your service in a better way? You see the point? So, what's that? Someone say something?
Yes, Prabhuji. Yes, I was thinking that when somebody appreciates, we feel more happy to do that seva and more enthusiastically. But sometimes when we are not noticed, it's like, we are doing the service, but we have that thought sometimes that, if we are noticed, we feel more happy. So how to do the service in much better way so that we don't have that thought at all?
Well, focus on Krishna's pleasure, know that he's happy. And the other thing is, don't worry about your own appreciation, but go around appreciating other devotees. If you go around appreciating other devotees, you won't worry anymore about whether you're getting appreciated or not. So if it makes you happy, try to serve other devotees by making them happy, by showing some, and not just fake, but sincere appreciation. So that's maybe the best way to deal with such a situation, is just stop thinking about our own needs as much and just start saying, oh, it's so nice, Prabhu, you offered that artik so beautifully. This prasadam is amazing. How did you cook such nice prasadam for Krishna? So if that's our focus, but you see my point being that if our only motivation comes from other recognition, what happens if we don't get recognized? Then we're not going to be enthusiastic. So eventually our consciousness has to get more fixed. But it's certainly nice to be, it's just a nice thing to appreciate the sincere service of another person and to have our sincere service appreciated. That's nice. Is that all right, Mataji?
Thank you.
Prabhu, relating to that appreciation point, and in many places when we read Prabhupada Leelamrita and many of his initial disciples, and I would say even at the later part, would probably do some activities expecting appreciation from Prabhupada, and they would go and report to him that this is what happened and this is what we did. On the contrary, sometimes Prabhupada would chastise them for whatever they would have said, or maybe in return of their expectation that they wanted an appreciation, but they get a chastisement. And again, maybe related to what Rasika Mataji was saying. So sometimes probably that might also lead to demotivation or something. When you go with an expectation of an appreciation and you don't get it, how do we manage that kind of a mood or expectation rather?
By having a more realistic expectation. Who am I? And what is the big service that I'm offering? I'm just trying to do I'm just trying to do whatever I can for Krishna and try to make it better. But that if you have to understand, if my happiness depends on something that's outside of my control, like another person's recognition, then that's a formula for disaster or a formula for unhappiness, because we can't control if people are going to recognize what we do or not. But what we can control, what is within our control, is to try our best to serve sincerely. That's what's in our control. One time in, I think it's 1974, Tamal Krishna Maharaj went to Srila Prabhupada's room and and Vraj Prabhu came to Prabhupada's room, and they were there. And at that time, Vraj Prabhu was like the first ISKCON devotee to get a job outside. Actually, it was a business. He was selling ladies' handbags, and he considered that Prabhupada was the proprietor of the business, and he would give Prabhupada all the profits. So you sometimes see, and if you read the letters, that, my dear Burijan, thank you for the $54.29, because he gave exactly all of his profits, right? So so they were both in the room in Prabhupada, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj had a check for, I think it was $30,000. And Vraj Prabhu gave him a check for like $380. And Prabhupada looked at the $30,000 and he just said, okay. And then he saw the check for $300. He said, oh, this is so nice. Thank you so much. You're such a surrendered soul. You're a grihasta and you're giving so much to your Guru Maharaj. This is wonderful. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj is sitting there like, I just gave you, 100 times as much. But Prabhupada, knew one disciple needed some encouragement and one disciple needed some humility. So, and if Krishna arranges for us to not be recognized or even to be chastised, what we want to do is try to see Krishna's hand in this. And not, okay, it's Pranaballabha Prabhu's fault, that he did this or that, right? No, we see Krishna's hand. Prabhupada once told Peter Burwash, I told you this, right? Do not be upset at the agent of your karma. Or do not be upset at the agent of Krishna's message to you also, right? So I hope that answered that question. Brajeshwari Mataji. Vyasadeva in Vedic scriptures exaggerated the karma kanda activities and gives lots of benedictions for the readers and hearers. But how do we convince or make non-devotees to understand about the glories of the holy name or pure devotion? Well, there's that could be a 3-hour lecture and coming into so many different things. But let's just focus on one thing. We want them to experience a higher taste. So whether it's in a bhajan, whether it's in a kirtan at the temple, whether it's just amazing, amazing prasadam, whether it's philosophy that really touches their heart, whether it's seeing the deity, whether, different people have different, but you want to give them an experience of Krishna consciousness, because that's what really does it. Just, as George Harrison wrote in the introduction to the Krishna book, we don't want to experience Krishna consciousness like the person who tries to lick the outside of a jar where there's honey inside, right? You don't get any taste there. So we could talk philosophically, you're not your body. We can talk about how beautiful Krishna is, and we can talk about those things, but we also want to find a way to engage them. And of course, hearing about Krishna is engagement, but additionally, trying to get them to do some service or some way or some coming to a festival or whatever, they get a higher taste. And that is what really convinces non-devotees and also keeps us enlivened in Krishna consciousness when we experience Krishna consciousness. So convincing, what's that saying? A man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. So it is, some people can be convinced by logic and argument. Prabhupada writes about that in the Adi Lila. And some but the main thing, you can talk about the glories of the holy name, and that's nice, but the main thing is for them to experience some of the glories of the holy name. We're very much an experiential movement. Yes. You're welcome. Okay, so are there any announcements this week? Achyut Prabhu?
No more specific announcements as such, other than we have some pending assignments by some of the participants, which we'll do it separately. There's nothing else specific.
Okay, so
And
the
for
homework
next week, we'll
assignment
be
is, we'll be covering chapter 2 next week, yes?
Yes, yeah. So that was the main thing, and people can pre-read that chapter before we come.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you very much, Prabhus, for your association. I wish you all the best, and we will see you next week.
Thank
Krishna
you.
will.
Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Krishna, thank you so much, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
So regarding the announcements, I think after the last week's Hare Krishna, can you hear me? Hare
Yes, we
Krishna.
can hear you, Prabhu.
Yes, we can hear you, Prabhuji.
So the main announcement was around the pending assignments. Still, after the last week's session, when we pulled out the list, there were about 10 participants or students who have yet to submit their assignments for text 8, 9, 10, and 11. I don't know if anybody else has submitted during the week again. So maybe we'll get a list from Varaha Prabhu again later today and see whoever is pending. So our request is again that if you can complete the NOI related assignments quickly, because we already have started getting assignments on NOD from Shankpani Prabhu. So the backlog will only kind of start putting pressure on doing too much of pending work together. And very soon, once we are done with the NOD and Isopnishad, we'll also be heading towards the closed book exams. So the sooner we complete our assignments is going to be helpful for all of us. And administratively also becomes easy to keep track of pending assignments and things like that. So Premdata Prabhu, if you want to add anything, or Vara Prabhu, you want to add anything?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. So yes, Prabhuji, so we have some pending assignments, and today I'll be circulating the list. And like this, as discussed, we will be publishing this in the students group so that everybody is aware of, their status. So I'll be doing this in an hour's time from now, Prabhuji. Thank you,
Sure.
Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Sure, thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. A quick question. The closed book exam for NOI, is that happening later or is that being planned shortly?
Mata's thought was that we will be clubbing the NOD, NOI, and Isopnishad. So the closed book exams will be held together for all the 3 modules. So
okay, is that
roughly
easier or
say,
more difficult?
sorry, Mataji.
Is that easier or more difficult to study 3 books simultaneously?
From a material perspective, it's postponing our misery. That's all I can say.
That would be more difficult to write all the exams at the same time. Okay.
Yeah.
But it is not only difficult to Prabhu. If you do combine all the 3 and make us to write this closed book exam, I think our level of preparation will be definitely lower than, conducting the exam separately for each one, Prabhu. When you conduct the exam separately for each one, you prepare exhaustively, your understanding level also becomes very high. Otherwise, the understanding level in all the 3 will be not that great, Prabhu. That's what my personal feeling. Sorry to say.
I agree with you, Ramakrishna Prabhu. Obviously, if you're 2-3 together, the pressure and it becomes a tick mark activity of that, just read them, finish the exam and move forward. And only thing is, unfortunately, the COVID situation, the second wave did put pressure on postponing the closed book exam for NOI. And now that we are already in the middle of NOD, so to get time to really organize this, probably we'll have a word with Vraj Vihari Prabhu if we should take a week's break in between and do NOI exam. But again, some devotees are still facing challenge because of the COVID. Their family members or known people are still struggling with the situation, and people are not getting time to focus on even completing assignments. So to prepare for a closed book exam and getting there could still be a little more of challenge in coming weeks at least. So we'll reevaluate this thing if we can just conduct NOI during this phase itself and move forward. But we'll have to talk to Vraj Vihari Prabhu and his team and then come back on that.
Please, Prabhu. Further, we are all aged people, Prabhu. We are all not student age, rather we have crossed the student age. So as I told you, the level of absorption also, as the age process, it diminishes. So considering that, I still strongly request you, plead before you that it should be chapter wise, NOI separately, NOD separately. It will be very helpful to us, and our level of understanding, as I told you, also will be very good, Prabhu, in that case. Otherwise, will be below par. Very well.
Maybe what we'll do, Prabhu, is we'll conduct a kind of a poll and see how many wants to have it immediately, considering the current situation. And if, let's say, majority, at least 80-90% are okay to do it in between, let's find a solution with Vraj Vihari Prabhu's team and plan accordingly or schedule accordingly.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. I have one more suggestion. Even if we postpone NOI, what we could do is probably not combine all three closed books simultaneously. We can stagger it 2 weeks, so that there's still time given for everybody to prepare themselves, even if we postpone.
I think another positive side to this is, if we look at it, is that the question paper is which is going to be a combined. This is not going to be 6 hours question. It is going to be again 2 hours, 2.5 hours. So that way, it's not, when we are combining 3, we will have the less questions or something like that from each one of book. So that's a positive way to look at it. I know everything has its own side, positives and negatives, but that's just, I'm saying, So actually, it was planned to have the closed book exam along with the open book exam within a 1 week, this thing. But then, as Prabhu said, like Corona thing was there in between. So it was Vraj Vihari Prabhu's suggestion that, let's not pressurize everyone and, let them come out of all the situation where most of the participants were facing that challenge at that point of time. So yes, so I don't think it is going to be like this, that morning 2 hours for NOI, then afternoon 2 hours for NOD, and third 2 hours for Ishopanishad in one day. It is going to be same 2.5 hours exam for all 3 modules.
Kindly forgive me to differ from you, Prabhu. Once again, reiterating, if you want all the participants, the level of knowledge of all the participants in each topic like NOI, NOD to be much better, conducting a separate exam will be definitely a better proposition rather than combining. When you combine,
there's no doubt about it.
Yourself rightly said, Prabhu, our level of knowledge will be definitely much less. Okay, anyhow, it is going to be only 2.5 hours, all 3. So level of preparation, level of understanding will correspondingly diminish, Prabhu. That there is a positive side about it, I agree. But negative side is this. The very purpose of joining the Bhakti Shastri course is that for many of us, we should understand all these things in a much better way. But if you say that it will be lesser questions, so your lesser preparation, naturally level of understanding also will be lesser, Prabhu.
Hey Krishna, Premnath Prabhu, we can have a polls, Prabhu. So as Rasa Sindhu Prabhu also opening, we can have polls and
Rasendra Prabhu, before Matra, sorry to interrupt you, Prabhu. Can you stop recording, Prabhu?
Oh, yeah.
Because all that gets posted on YouTube, all our discussion.